Hey guys, Greg here with another episode of the Vinyl Rundown, and this is our new artist spotlight series. And fortunate to have with us today, all the way from New York, Patricia Brennan, who is a vibes player on the New York jazz scene. Hi, Patricia. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I have not known your work that long, but I think we both discovered each other on social media. And somebody reached out to somebody, and we decided to have a little chat, especially because you have a very nice new record coming out very soon, and it's available for pre-order. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, I thought we'd spend some time just talking about you, your career, how you got to where you are. So you're from Mexico, Veracruz, which is a part of Mexico I'm not that familiar with. Is that a place in Mexico that's important, either musically to Mexico's culture or to your influences, if you want to speak on that maybe a little?
Yeah, definitely. So Veracruz is a state and a city as well. So it's a state that goes along the Gulf of Mexico in Mexico. And it's actually the city of Veracruz, which is in the state of Veracruz. That's where I'm from. It's actually the first town founded in the Americas after the Spanish came into the island. So that's actually where the Spanish came into the main land. And
is that the 1700s or 1800s?
1502.
Americans don't know anything about Mexican history. So.
That's the year that
1502.
1502.
Long time ago.
So it's a long time ago. And so because of that, because it's a port of entry, it's one of the most important ports in Mexico. But because of that, throughout history, it has a lot of influences, musically, gastronomic influences, and also the people from there. I'll tell you more about my story. Like me, we have a lot of different backgrounds that are not usual from other parts of Mexico, so Spanish, Italian, French, from Africa, that you don't see anywhere else in Mexico. So that reflects in the music as well. So definitely a huge musical influence in me, even if I didn't want to, it's one of those things that you just grow up listening to what's around you and you just end up, soaking it in.
So when you were growing up, were you exposed to like the folk music, people playing on the streets versus the academies and conservatories, or maybe it's a combination of both?
It was a combination of both. My grandmother was a concert pianist. So she actually, now that I think about it, so back in the, 30s or something like that in Mexico, her being a woman and that being her career was actually pretty incredible at the time. And so because of her, I had that classical music influence, and she will come to my house. That's where her piano was, and she would practice there all the time. So I will see that all the time. And then on the other hand, around me, there's a lot of the traditions there. There's a style of music called son jarocho, which is typically from that area, and it's a combination of sort of like Spanish like influence music, like flamenco-ish type of feel, but then it has some other crossover with African influences and then native Mexican influence. So it's like a really cool type of music. So I grew up seeing that since I can have a memory of that, since I can remember.
Are there any well-known composers or music acts to come out of Veracruz besides you that Americans would know about?
There's a very famous one called Agustin Lara, which, he has a lot of really beautiful songs, kind of like popular style, ballads. But Agustin Lara, I'm spacing out right now on
That's
other
okay.
musicians there, but there's a lot of other great musicians throughout time, but he's one of the biggest ones in the world. And but the other big thing that's very common there is the traditional Mexican marimba, which is one of the only few places in the entire country that has a tradition. The other place is Chiapas, which is in the southern border of Mexico. But Veracruz has a very particular way of approaching that tradition. So it has its own songs.
You said marimba.
Yeah, marimba. Yeah,
right.
But
so you play marimba. You play both vibraphone and marimba, which
exactly.
My viewers should know. One has the middle bars and the other is wood, I guess.
Exactly.
Which is a more percussive sound, and one is a more, pure tone.
Yeah, and
but
the
they
pedal,
both are
which
wonderful.
is the cue difference. Totally, yeah. So that's another, huge influence of just even the instrument I play now, which is seeing that tradition since I was 3 or 4 years old, since I can remember, so
I
yeah, that's a
wondered I
little.
wondered where people pick up the vibes, because most 7-year-olds don't say I want to play vibes. They usually say I want to play
Yeah,
guitar or piano. But I guess that was all over the place where you're growing up, so not as
exactly.
much of a
Yeah.
surprise. Okay, this makes
Yeah, I
sense.
mean, that makes a huge difference when you see it around, you know what it is, and I had one since I was little, like a toy marimba or whatever,
Hmm.
it was. And I encountered that here that, people are not used to seeing the instrument, so therefore they don't know even what it is. I get a lot of like the xylophone. That's the
Yeah,
typical name that it gets, but yeah.
Americans all know what a xylophone is, but nobody. I never see a xylophone. I don't know
Yeah,
where they're learning about xylophones.
yeah.
Classical orchestras, they have marimbas, right?
They have xylophones, but I
Is a
mean, xylophone is
xylophone middle or what?
Xylophone is one of the most common ones in orchestral repertoire in
Hmm.
glockenspiel, like the bell
Yeah,
sets,
the
like the
big
tiny.
ring one,
Yeah,
right?
is very rare. Like unless it's like some like contemporary new composer piece that you'll have a
Yeah,
marimba, to
Stephen
play.
Reich or somebody like that.
Steve Reich, yeah, but vibraphone is another instrument that here and there, like Leonard Bernstein, like West Side Story suite for orchestra, he there's a huge vibraphone part in that suite, so vibraphone is also more used, but more in the contemporary sort of repertoire. But
So,
xylophone, it's more
so
common.
did you start with the mallet instruments before piano?
No, I started with piano, so
I
I was about
assume most
three
people would
into
start with
four.
piano. Okay.
Yeah, and because of my grandmother, like officially, I started taking lessons when I was 4. But before that, I would bother my grandmother all the time, just about trying to learn and trying to copy what she was doing. And so that was really my first love, and I still play it, obviously not professionally, but it's one of a great influence in my mindset as a vibraphonist now.
So, so you started with classical piano, reading music at a very young age,
Yeah, yeah,
to the point where you were performing, or just recitals, or on
yeah.
the
My
side, or
first.
like serious about it at a young age?
Serious, yeah. My first recital, I was 5, and it was like full on recital, full pieces, and
Beethoven,
I
what
was
were you
in a
playing?
museum. I think it
What?
was a Mozart sonatina, a Mozart
Hmm.
sonata, and
Hmm.
I forget the name. It was very very common, it's in C major, and then I played. It was like a Burgmüller. It was like a very common, study, like
Hmm.
25 studies for piano, So it was like one of those, traditional
Hmm.
piano pieces. But it was a huge influence, classical composers, classical piano, and also Mexico has a really strong tradition in music education in a conservatory level, because we don't have music programs in public schools like America does. Like
Hmm.
that doesn't exist. And maybe you'll have a music program in a private school, but it's not really, a good program. It's maybe a choir or anything like that. So you have to go to a conservatory. And it's not all Mexico, especially when I was growing up. It was only in Veracruz and Mexico City that there were like the two major sort of musical epicenters. So I went to a type of school that's sort of like a conservatory where like you enter since you're 3 or 4, and you follow the same sort
Hmm.
of grade that you follow in regular school, like first grade but in music, second grade
Wow.
in
So
music,
you were being
and
trained from diapers to become a musician, practically.
yeah, it's very intense. It's a whole different, training. Like reading in all clef, solfege, choir. All the
Hopefully you were
percussion.
on board with it, and you that was what your
Yeah,
desire. Your
yeah.
parents
I
didn't just
wanted
push
to.
you into
Yeah.
it.
No, do it. I think that's the other thing too. There's definitely those stories where I can hear of people being kind of pushed into it, but I think for me it was one of those things that is all I knew because it was all around me constantly.
Mhm.
So I wanted to do it. And I think I guess I was lucky that at that young age,
Mhm.
I kind of had that that bug inside of me. So yeah.
And here I thought the U.S. wasn't doing a good job with music education, but I played in jazz band in school. My son played in the brass band and jazz band in
Hmm.
junior high, high school. So depending where you are, I guess it could be good or not so good. But
Right.
anyway, was there a jazz element going on back then also in
Yeah.
your early education?
So the one thing that was closer to, I guess, improvisation was the tradition of Cuban son in Veracruz particularly. So like I said, it's a port of entry. So there's a lot of Cuban immigrants, that settle in Veracruz. So Cuban son, salsa, all the Latin kind of Cuban, Afro-Cuban styles are very present. And actually, one of the things that some of the Cuban musicians talk about, like danzón, for example, that tradition that was huge in Havana, in Veracruz now is like it's new home base. Like in Cuba, musicians are trying to move forward to, like, I think, new styles and trying to do something different, but Veracruz is sort of kind of frozen in time in that particular area. So you get to see those kind of musical influences, which involves improvisation. So in my time, I remember I used to play around with it. And my dad, he's an engineer, but he's an amateur Latin percussionist. So he will have rumbas in the house, which is like a jam, and then you'll see like a salsa pianist like improvising, and I wanted to do that too. So I picked up some of those things unofficially. Like, I never took lessons or anything, but it's one of those things that I heard the records. I was trying to copy what they were doing on piano. And,
so they don't have a jazz tradition, but an improvisation tradition.
Yeah, exactly.
I forgot to put your website up here. We'll leave that up for a little while. I'm giving you some free advertising here.
Thank you. I think jazz is actually, when I left Mexico, it was 2003. It was probably beginning to emerge as a kind of degree that you could potentially study in college, or more like formal education, but it was still in very early stages. And I know there were some jazz musicians that maybe came to the United States to study and then came back to Mexico, but nothing really official since I was a kid, until I left. And now it's a whole different story. Now there's actually programs in Mexico City and in Veracruz and in other parts of the country. But at least when I was growing up, it was just, you were on your own. You had to check out the records on your own.
So you came to the U.S. specifically to start college?
Yeah, so it was an interesting kind of story. So I went to a conservatory called Curtis Institute of Music, which is a college of a little bit over 100 people.
What's it called? What's it called again? I'm sorry.
Curtis Institute of Music.
Okay. Curtis.
Yes, it's based in Philadelphia. So it's a classical conservatory. It doesn't have jazz there. But the way it works is any instrument is in an orchestra. They basically accept only one instrumentalist per instrument, except for violin. They get a few more.
Gotta have a bunch of those.
Right. But it's very, very hard to get into. And it was kind of an accident how I ended up there, because at that time I was working in Mexico in an orchestra, and I was 18 years old, and I'm just like, I don't think I can do this, forever. I have to do something else. And I always wanted to, write my music, improvise, kind of be more like a soloist. At least at the time I had that mindset, more of a percussion soloist. So I was just trying to look for an avenue to be able to do that. And the only thing I could afford was to go to a free school. So Curtis, is fully funded. Like, whoever gets in, you get a free ride, and you get money for anything, for living expenses, for clothing, for food, for. So I didn't have any money. My parents couldn't pay for an American college. So
I thought you were going to a fancy private school, and it's the opposite, sort of. Well, that's great that such a school exists, but it's all classical oriented. And so everybody who gets in is pretty darn good then. They only take
it's an intense school. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, like, Lang, like a very famous pianist, went to Curtis. Eugene Wang's another famous pianist that went to Curtis there. Leonard Bernstein went to Curtis.
Really?
So it's it's a huge a school with a huge tradition. So I was really lucky to, that the stars aligned somehow for me to end up there, which actually I didn't even audition in the normal way. I was touring in New York at the time with another orchestra, and a friend of mine that has gone to Curtis told me, you should play for my teacher there. We have Saturday off, so why don't we go to Philly and you can meet him. And so that's how I ended up auditioning. I I printed the form, handed it out to him. Like, it wasn't really like an official thing, I would just, again, I had that bug. I wanted to leave Mexico, and my friend thought about this idea, and it worked out. A month later, the teacher called me and said, "You want to come?" And I was like, "Yes." So,
Well, that's great.
yeah, that was basically my beginning in, my
Are
musical
there,
career
there's
here.
probably some big name professors, teachers there, maybe some I've heard of, I don't know. In terms of the faculty?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the piano, this Pam Frank, and the violin faculty. Hilary Hahn is another alumni. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. Really incredible violinist.
Not sure.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tradition again within the classical world. Like, everybody is there. So it was great too, and also it really puts classical music into a different eye, because the musicians that I got to meet there, usually have this perception that classical musicians, just read, they don't improvise, or they don't have that creative aspect. And a lot of my friends, were pianists that could improvise in the style of Chopin, in the style of Mozart, in the style of Bach, and they really knew music inside out from that style, so improvisation is not necessarily limited to jazz, and that's something that I appreciate and learn being there. It's like, wow, you can do that in this music too.
Well, I still think, I assume maybe 80 or 90% really don't do much improvising.
Oh, definitely. It's a very particular.
If they do, okay, this concerto is in C minor, so you just have to stick within C minor. Well, jazz musicians don't call that improvising, because you got to change keys and change chords and modes and all that stuff.
Right.
So were you doing any gigging during this time? On the weekends, doing any improv or jazz or special projects?
So I guess my journey to jazz here in America started there. There was a bass player that was coming to school to do classes, I think every other week or so. And that's sort of where I was like, oh, that's actually kind of what I wanted to do. I want to improvise. And mallet instrument came to be my choice because piano was such a dear instrument to me, that combined with my background as a percussionist, that kind of ended up being the perfect combination. So I started kind of dwelling more into vibes, improvising on vibraphone at the time. So, I would go to jam sessions in Philly, I would come to New York to take lessons with vibraphonists here. And then, I would just try to do some gigs, in town, but, nothing major. But actually, I did end up meeting some musicians that I play with now, like Matt Mitchell. He's also from Philly, and I met him there. I think the biggest thing that happened in Philly as far as improvising was a venue called The Painted Bride was organizing a residency. And so we'll bring a musician from New York, and then that musician will choose local musicians. So in that case, the musician was Joan Hollenbeck. So he put together like a big band, like 12 musician ensemble. And so I auditioned for that, and so I ended up getting in there. There was Matt Mitchell also in there, and there were a lot of other kind of known local musicians that were sort of into, more adventurous improvising. And so that's sort of what really started it all, my present stage of my musical career, that connection.
Were they doing a lot of gigging locally, or touring, or recording?
I think just locally, I think in Philly, a lot of the musicians that I knew there, I didn't really know of them touring. It was more like local, and there's a very strong local scene, and not only a very straight ahead local scene too, but there's also a kind of avant-garde scene as well that's very hidden there and very, very tight. So it's one of those communities that is more local, not like New York that we're all over the place, but so it was more of a local, and yeah.
So after Curtis, you ended up in New York at some point.
Yeah. So
where you are now.
Yeah, where am I now? So since I never really had the jazz school experience, I wanted to do my master's in jazz performance, and then on top of that, because I'm an immigrant from Mexico, that's always in the back of your head. So you're always trying to find ways to stay in the country, and so one way was to keep going to school. It's the easiest way to apply to school, and then you get a student visa, and then you get another 2 years or 4 years or whatever, you know. So that was the two main reasons why I ended up going to school. Before I did that, I took a year off, and I actually started studying with Stephen Harris at the time, and that was a huge moment in my life because he really opened my eyes to kind of connecting everything that I was dealing with. Because I was struggling with, you know, my classical past, my straight ahead past from Philly, because, you know, you get that training. And then I was really into avant-garde musicians. Like at the time, I was already into, you know, V. Iyer, Tim Byrne, Ralph Alessi. I was checking out their music, and I was trying to connect it all, you know. So Stefan was kind of a really great.
Remind us who Stefan Harris is for those of us who might not know.
Stefan Harris is a very well-known vibraphonist.
Vibes.
And
Okay.
bass player, yeah, and I mean he's had an incredible career. Now I believe he's I'm not exactly correct on this. I think he's the dean of the jazz program at Manhattan School of Music, I think, or something like that. And but he's devoting himself more to education now. But he's had an incredible career. Played with SF Jazz Collective. Played with many incredible musicians. Has a lot of records out. So anybody that's a vice player will know of Stephen Harris.
I'm a mediocre guitar player.
No.
You mentioned Tim Byrne. Did you see the interview I did with him a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
I was really shocked that he agreed to do that with me. But it's good. It's a good calling card for me. He's an amazing guy, and he plays in New York. You've probably seen him. Have you seen him or met him?
I played with him. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I play in a big band with him. It's Michael Foreman's big band called Ensemble Colossus. So he's one of the members. So so we actually have a record out on ACM called The Distance.
I've seen that. I didn't realize you were on that one.
I'm actually there on marimba. I only play marimba there, which is a very unusual thing, to see a big band with a marimba in it. Maybe Vibes you will see that, but that's a whole other story as to how that came to be. But yeah.
Foreman is a bass player.
And, incredible.
And he, the tunes, are they mostly his compositions or all?
I mean, the record is all his. The record is all his compositions. He wrote a suite for the record, and then he wrote a prelude and I think The Distance, and then the suite comes into it. So the record is named after that sort of song that we played as well. But yeah, all his compositions. He's an incredible bass player, and then he's one of those people that has been in my life. Even before as a student. A huge mentor of mine and inspiration. So it was playing with that band, and when he asked me to join that band, it was kind of a surreal experience and dream come true, because a lot of the musicians that I used to listen to were in it. And so Mary Halverson is in it. Tomahawk Fujiwara.
Is she a guitar player?
Guitar player. Yeah.
Okay.
Incredible guitar player. And I mean, there's tons of
I didn't think of her in a big band context, but I'm sorry. Who else did you mention?
Check out the record. Ralph Alessi, trumpet player. Jonathan Finlinson. Jacob Gartig on trombone. I'm trying to kind of go through the names right now, but it's just an incredible. Brian Settles, on saxophone. It's
I'll definitely
an incredible band.
Have to listen to that. You're on ECM. That's big time.
It's a must.
ECM recording artist. Very, very good.
Yeah. So that's an incredible record and just incredible band to play with. So yeah.
I would hope they would come to LA sometime, but nobody's touring anywhere now. So
we actually were in April. We were supposed to be going to San Francisco, but obviously that got canceled pretty soon. After this whole thing started, and so that was and I mean, with a group like that, and it's interesting because my career kind of started a lot with big bands. Like I played with the Joan Holland Large Ensemble, which is another big band. With Michael Foreman, VGI actually had a big band that we did a few shows only, and so big bands are so hard to put together. you know, and to tour with that is just like I remember
Yeah,
with Home
it's
I do have,
expensive
it's expensive,
to
yeah.
put 15 or 18 musicians in hotel rooms and
Yeah,
all that stuff.
and tour.
I
I mean,
played in
we
big bands when I was in high
yeah.
school. I was fortunate. I didn't know when I moved into this neighborhood that I was one in the high school region of one of the best high school big
Mhm.
bands in the state. And they were invited to play at the Monterey Jazz Festival like 15 years in a
Yeah,
row. And Ted Nash came out of our band, if you know him, the sax player
nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who plays
Nice.
in the with Winton. And I actually
Hmm.
won a little trophy at Monterey with them for guitar
Nice,
playing.
nice.
But there wasn't much competition, let's just say that year. But the sound of playing with a big band with 12,
Oh
15
yeah,
musicians all at once is like
yeah.
nothing you can experience. Well, maybe in an orchestra, but
That's something I wanted to say, you know, because for me, it was almost like recreating that experience. Because, you know, I
mhm,
love orchestra music and I love that. It's just the part that for me was lacking was just, it wasn't really fulfilling my creative, you
mhm.
know, needs. You know, I really wanted to have that freedom. But when I started playing with big bands, it was kind of the best of two worlds. You know, you get that sort of powerful feeling that you get from playing with a large group of people, but then also you have that freedom to be yourself and contribute, you know, with your own personal sound. So I love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
When it clicks, it's amazing. And you know, big bands take a lot of rehearsal compared to these small combos, right? I mean, hours
Yeah,
and
I mean
hours of
it's
rehearsing.
it's
Combos are just
interesting.
here's the chart, play it, and you're
Yeah,
you know.
I mean with this big band, it's kind of like that too. I mean, we have one rehearsal and go, you know.
Well, if you're all pros, I
But
guess you don't need as
but
many.
there's,
Right?
yeah, I mean there's a lot of amazing musicians that are able to do that, you know,
Mhm.
and I think, I mean, especially in New York, that to be able to pay people for their time, and so
Mhm.
you have limited sources, you know, for rehearsing and everything else. So yeah.
So let's move forward to a little bit about what you're doing very recently. Maybe
Hmm.
time to talk about the record and what you're up to lately, especially in the year of COVID.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I actually, I teach too. I teach at the new school, and I started teaching at New York University this year, and I have private students. So thankfully, that's have helped me throughout this time
Oh, you
because
teach it. You teach at NYU.
yeah, I started teaching. I have a vibraphone student there now. I'm the new vibraphone teacher, which is kind of surreal because I went there for my master's,
Mm-hmm.
and Stefan was the teacher at the time. And you know, then there was a period I think that they didn't have vibraphone players, so and Stefan left, you know, and so they reached out to me this summer, and so it's for me it's kind of a really cool experience to come back to NYU in this
So
way, you know.
you're just starting there.
Yeah, I'm just starting there, but at
So
the new
you don't
school.
have classes. You just have individual students at
I
this
am
point.
individual students, yeah. And at the new school, I teach a co-teach a class with Mary Halverson and
Mm-hmm.
an ensemble class, and then I also have private students there. And I've been there since 2018. So you know that's a really huge help, you know, to have that going, you know, and have some kind
Right.
of background, and as well, you know, have private students of my own. So you know,
I interviewed a guy who I guess he calls himself a professor at NYU. Do you know this guy Timo? Timo
Timo Volfred,
Voldrecht?
yes,
Yeah, he
I
was
know, yeah.
one of the very first interviews I did because I was doing the Sonny Rollins tribute
Oh
project,
yeah.
and so he's a
Yeah,
amazing guy too from Germany, and kept in touch with him. So
we actually were in the masters together. He
hmm.
was another saxophonist that was in the same. I mean, he came in a year after me, but we were 1 year, you know, in the same, you know, the same program. But yeah, definitely, I know Timo very well. Yeah,
It's amazing all these people I'm running
yeah,
into, and I'm in LA, so.
yeah.
Anyway, we
So,
should move forward to maybe a little bit about your recording career as a solo artist. You have your new
mhm.
record coming out, but I think you have another one or two records that you put out as the leader or soloist.
So I have, this is my first record, I guess, as a leader. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all the other records that I had before, you know, are all in other people's bands. You know, like some of the recent records is a trio that's led by Tomo Fujiwara, called Seven Poets Trio with Tomiko Reed on cello. But that's all his compositions. and then the big band records with Mike Foreman and Hollenbeck and so on. But this is kind of my first venture as a leader, really doing this all material that's mine and my vision and on my own terms. So and I wanted to do a solo part of it because I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and also is that sort of classical background where so some of the first things that you do is a solo record, and then on top of that is one of those things that I've been a side woman for over 10 years now, and this is sort of what's been building, and this is sort of what came out, as the first, expression of my own. So I'm really, really proud of it. The record has the pieces for marimba and vibraphone, so it's features both instruments separately, not at the same time. And some compositions are through composed, but with improvisation involved. And then there's also a series of improvisations I did at the studio. The second day in the studio, I had time and I had the studio. So I was, I just improvised on both instruments, and I ended up actually using all of those improvisations. So there's actually 2 full records, but the first one's coming out right now.
I'm trying to pull up the page for it. So bear with me while I mess around. It doesn't really fit on the computer screen too well. I'll scroll through it. I'll get it up on the screen, and you can keep. Nope.
Oh yeah, there's the.
I'll just kind of scroll through this. So that's the name of the record, which is what now?
Yeah. So MAQUISHTI, actually, I created that word, but it's inspired by a word that is MAQUISHTI. So that is a Nahuatl word. Nahuatl is a native language from Mexico, and particularly from the region that I'm from. And it's still spoken today, which is really cool. This is that's another project that I have. But yeah,
sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was on the page for that one. I should have been showing this all along.
That's the ECM record I was telling you earlier. That's Mike Foreman's record. That's just another project with Matt Mitchell. Yeah.
I don't want to go backwards in time here. So if I want to see the new record, is there a page on here I should be looking at?
Go to music. Yeah, you go to music. Yeah, there you go.
I couldn't think of that on my own. Music.
Okay. So that's it.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the special edition vinyl. There's only 100 copies of this one.
How do you? Well, you've got other copies on regular vinyl.
Yeah, regular vinyl. There's definitely more than.
How many copies do you even press on something like this? A couple thousand.
We have only 100 available.
100 in the special one, but on the other one.
In the special one. On the other one, I should ask my label on this. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's more than 100. So yeah. And
what's the record label on this again?
It's Valley of Search.
Valley of Search.
Owned and run by Nabil Ayers. And I believe actually the name comes from an older record by one of the other musicians in the label, Alan Brofman, saxophonist Alan Brofman. And so that's kind of, I think, how the label started. Valley of Search was the name of his record, I think, back in the 70s, and there was a reissue of that record. And then, Nabil expanded it by adding another musician, electronic musician, and then myself, which we actually kind of find each other through that video of one of the tracks from the record. It's called Sonnet. So there's I put a video of that. Yeah.
We'll get our folks will get to hear that in a second.
You
said Nabil Ayers was related to Roy Ayers?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah.
He's a well-known vibe player, so
definitely. So it's an interesting kind of connection, that kind of just happened to be. I'm a bass player, and then there's sort of that connection a little bit there. But I mean, he's been wonderful, and it's been really great to work with him, and it really just like making this dream come true was great. So. This is Sonnet. This is the first single that came out back in June. It's on the record, and so I did actually a video of this, I believe 2 years ago, and I put that on YouTube, put that everywhere, and that sort of got me a lot of opportunities after that. Nabil check that video and reach out to me, and other opportunities came out from that video. So this is sort of one of the songs that started all.
YouTube is a great medium, I found out.
What is it?
YouTube is a very good medium.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I found out. You can
Definitely.
be famous tomorrow if you put up the right video. Maybe
Exactly.
we can hear a few seconds or a minute of this. I don't know if you want to speak over it or speak before we play. This is a composed song or an improvisation?
This is a tune. I composed the head, and so I play the melody, and then I improvise over it, and then I bring the melody back. Very standard, So I think this video is an excerpt, so it starts in the middle of the improvisation.
Well, if that's okay with you, let's see if this works on my technology. Uh-oh.
Yep.
YouTube is telling us what to watch next, as they always do. Luckily, it was you.
This news effect, yeah.
Okay, let's make. So yeah, that sounded very nice. I recognize kind of jazz progressions there, and melody and chords and etc. But yeah, very nice. That's just a small excerpt, guys. So you can check that out on YouTube. But also, it's available. Bandcamp is really the place to purchase it versus your website, or maybe both.
It's actually everywhere, so in Bandcamp, Bandcamp is cool because it supports artists, and most of the, revenue goes to the artist, but I think actually you keep scrolling down, you can see it's also on Apple, Music, iTunes, basically any platform available.
The artwork on the cover is really nice. Is there a story behind that?
Yeah, actually, talking about finding people through social media. So I'm really big on Instagram, and I like to mostly use Instagram to find of things that I'm interested in. I like art. I like design and food and all those things. So I try to connect with people there that have those same interests. So I found this artist. He's from Finland. His name is Juha Penttinen. And I saw this, this artwork on his page, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And he actually has a video form of the same artwork that later I'm going to be sharing. And I just thought it was incredible, and also kind of, reflected sort of the vibe that I sort of had in mind of this record, and especially once you hear the vibe. No pun intended.
Sorry. But, bad joke. Terrible joke. No.
But just sort of, there's a little bit of that peacefulness, but there's also a little nebulosity and a little sort of mystery behind it too. So I just really fell in love with this cover. So I reached out to him, and he was, happy to work, with me, and there it is. That's the result right there.
I feel that little Scandinavian ECM kind of a vibe.
Yeah,
and white and the trees.
Totally. I actually that song Sonnet, I wrote it in Maine, in like middle of nowhere, Maine. Mm-hmm. And in the winter, my husband is from Maine, and therefore the Brennan last name. so
Irish, maybe.
Yeah, he's definitely Irish, and now with Patricia is totally Irish, even though I don't look Irish at all.
This lady's Mexican.
What is it?
Good. To look at you and say this lady's Mexican, but she has a fully Irish name.
Yeah. So the winters up there, I mean, for me is I love it, and it has that feel to it too, that sort of vibe, and so this picture, even though it's not in Maine, it reflected that. But the picture of the single Sonnet, actually, I took that picture in Maine, and so that's sort of a similar vibe.
That's this other picture.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So that's my husband walking in front of me.
Oh, that's him.
And yeah, I know. Some people can tell. And but it's just sort of that eerie, mysterious, but then peaceful vibe, and it just really connected, with me. So
it feels nothing like Mexico.
I know.
But that's a long time ago. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's just that's another thing too, Mexico is like America, like there's people from everywhere, and with so many different influences, and I think everybody has their own different path or journey, and even though I'm from Mexico, I have my own sort of vision, but yeah, but the name is influenced by that.
Are you gonna do any? Obviously, you're not doing any touring to promote the album at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
or live stream gigging or anything like that.
Right now, I don't have any live stream. I did a couple back in August, and yeah, actually both were in August, and but yeah, nothing like that. And I've seen some friends trying to play in the city, but I mean, with the vibes, for me, it's moving that instrument during this time. I don't want to venture, doing that. And so I've been trying to stay, home as much as I can. And so, I've been just taking advantage of the time to just, promote the record and keep studying music, because, you're forever studying a student of music, and teach, and so those are sort of like the activities that I devoted my time to.
Well, more YouTube videos are welcome if you even if they're
definitely
just quick improvisations or just conversations.
There's some coming. There's another one coming next week. So
okay, good.
Yeah.
I think we're about at the end of our time, Patricia. Mm-hmm. So unless there's anything else, you've had an amazing career, an amazing diverse set of influences, and wish you all success. Looking forward to hearing the whole record when it comes out. Keep us posted on any projects you're doing.
Thank you.
Guys can
definitely
subscribe to Patricia has a channel on YouTube, which is just called Patricia Brennan. Patricia Brennan. Your YouTube channel is called what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the newsletter, you can sign up for that on the website, and just for more things. And the record's coming out January 15th, but you can pre-order it now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a black regular vinyl copy, and then there's a signed copy on the colored vinyl for a few dollars more. And we're doing whatever we can to support the independent musicians out there, trying to make it happen during the no music, the year of no music.
Exactly. It's so weird. Trying to keep the music going in some
we're surviving, way. Yeah. Online.
Yeah.
All right, Patricia. I think we'll sign off. I'll hit the end button. So thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
All righty.
Thank you.